I'm not a believer in too many mystical things, but I'm going to start with a story. More than 2 years ago, I was on a flight back home from a long and intense world tour. There was a woman in the seat next to me. Her name was Daphne. She was apparently a very successful businesswoman who had been through a thing or two. We had a pretty deep talk about life. I told her that I'm thinking about taking a break from a musical project that I've been playing for years and is now finally at its peak. And that I'm afraid that if I do so, it would mean that I've wasted the last decade of my life. Now I know there is no such thing as real waste. I know that the experience and knowledge I gained is worth a lot. But for some reason, her answer is something that I still remember till this day. She said, "The people you've come to know along the way, that's priceless. That's the real asset." So I'm happy to present this project of 2 years of creating with the people that I've come to know along the way. An album full of collaborations with some of my childhood heroes and some of my good friends. I named it Out of Orbit, Wisdom of the Crowds. Growing up, I used to go to outdoor raves and get exposed to electronic music. That's how I started to collect tracks that were made by friends and friends of friends. I decided to go straight to the source, which was how I got Impulse Tracker and started to produce myself. Then I went traveling in South America. Went to some big parties like Solaris 2005 in Brazil. So I met many DJs and was inspired to choose a life of music. I got back home and built my first studio. I met Kobe, we formed Loud, went on 10 years of intense worldwide touring. Huge festivals, amazing stages, hundreds of hotel rooms. Got to travel to almost any country on the planet, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, and sometimes with my family. On my spare time I tried to collaborate and explore as many musical styles as I could. I built 8 studios, and then it felt like a good time to slow down. I wanted to relax, stop with the gigs, and focus only on making an album. Really diving into the creative process, just living it. And that's what happened. I mean, sometimes I used to wake up and my only mission for the whole day was to record another hi-hat pattern from the 909. And if I was happy with that, I've done my thing for today. So I really enjoyed making this album, and I thought it was a good idea to take you through it step by step, showing you one cool thing in each track. First track of the album, it's called Imagine. It was done by Simon Berry from Art of Trance, Union Jack, and myself. Starts a little bit like Age of Love, yeah, we know that. When I got to finishing this track, the project was a bit too heavy on my computer, and my computer started to stutter, making all these strange sounds and just getting stuck every few seconds. I couldn't hear anything, I couldn't hear what I was working on, so I wanted the melody of the track to represent the computer getting stuck and having all these little bits and pieces. Second track of the album, Space Jahnun. It was made by Yuli, Perfect Stranger, and myself.
You can have anything in this world you want to have, and you can be anything in this world you want to be.
Kick from 1991 or something. Sounds like a basketball. Cool thing about the bass line is that it's got 2 layers. It's got this main layer and then this resonating layer. This next track is called Star. It was done by Gorovich, who is a star, and myself. One cool thing that I really like about this track are these high frequency sounds which really cut through the mix. You can really hear them. All you need is a bit of reverb. Okay, fourth track of the album is called No Disco. It was done by Shpongle, Simon Posford and Jahnun and myself and a bunch of more friends that came in to help. I know that Simon and Raj recorded the bass player. You also have a lot of Raj's recording, like the flute and his voice on top, Simon's crazy synth work, and then a bunch of my friends came and recorded whatever they could. So many people just contributed to this track and helped. I grew up listening to Hallucinogen, which is one of Simon Posford's earliest projects, if not, maybe it's even his first, I don't know. And that was basically my school for synthesizers. I used to just listen to that and think about synths. And yeah, I even had the chance to perform with him once in the Solar Eclipse Festival in Oregon, and it was a pretty exciting experience for me. So it means a lot to me to have a collaboration with Shpongle in this album. So let's dive a little bit into this track. No, this is actually Roger Ram's flute. I really like the way that, first of all, this effect on the flute sounds. It's the same effect that we heard before, just together with the original flute, and how it blends together with my SA21. The idea of the track was to keep playing normally and just switch into a disco track without you noticing it. So only after a few seconds you'd be like, hey, what? I'm dancing to disco. And yeah, you are. And that's what's happening right now. This is the fifth track of the album. This track is called Flanged. It was done by Gorovich, aka Gorovich, and myself. This is the second track with Nimrod on this album. However, this one is my favorite out of the two because it involves acoustic recordings. One of the things that I like the most about using recorded acoustic instruments in my tracks is that it makes me work way harder on my synthesizers because I'm trying to match that complexity and the richness of the recorded sounds, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do with electronic instruments in order to make everything fit into one track. A lot of cool modular sounds by Nimrod. This is one of my favorite sounds. Yeah, let's listen to it without the kick drum. Next track is called Voodoo. It was done by Rocky Tilbor and myself. Rocky came here. Actually, he was the first guest that came and worked on this project with me. At that time I was pretty much into the 909, but Rocky came here and he was like, hey, let's record anything we can find. Looped it around. I think the sound really fits. I really like the break part of this track. If you're dancing, if you're in a festival, I don't know if you're gonna think that it's a break, because this little bass line here is still holding you. And then you start to realize that the kick drum is not there anymore. And then when the bass stops, you're left with nothing but this psychedelic pad and its sound effects. By this point, all you really need is for the kick and bass to come back at the right moment and nothing more. And you can really make a dancer go crazy. In the right time, of course. Super hypnotic track, Shamanic vibe, Voodoo. This next track is called Losegelost. It was done by Marcus from X-Dream and myself. Marcus came here for a few days, we made some techno, and after he left I was like, hey, I'm working on this album, how do you feel about collaborating? So he said, yeah, sure, let's do something over the internet. And we did. Okay, this next track is called Square One. It was done with Shulman, the great Shulman. In many ways this track is not as deep as the rest of the album, which may be a good thing, but it's got my daughter at the end of it. And yeah, she's flanged too. She's got a flanger on her. That's the only sound she could make back then. She only had one preset. When I was working on this album, I had so many talented guests in the studio. Just to name a few, Reshe Ferrari, Ofer Dikovsky, Dekel, which we played together in one of the biggest electronic music demonstrations that ever took place here, and he actually has a track with me on the album called Hypnotize. And to be honest, I was heavily influenced by all of them.
There are no rules.
A great example would be Ella Goodman. She's an iconic DJ and she's basically an encyclopedia for music. Working with her got me really into exploring old 90s acid music, which eventually led to tracks just like this one. Last track of the album, the physical version. This is a cover for Astral Projection, really old track of them that is called Searching for UFOs. The climax is its first sound. Just one long uplift for the first 3 minutes. Oh, it's pretty cool. All the sound effects, I'm gonna show you this. So that was a Roland SH1000, actually the first synthesizer ever made by Roland, and it was used to record all the sound effects in this. Eventually I had to put it all together, and Didor Fear was in charge of mixing and mastering.
That's a video.
בת כמה את? Okay?
עוד פעם.